Sometimes the minister is taking so much burden from listening to the brethren, he has no one to share it to. So when he spills it to a certain deacon or someone, he's just stressed out of his own mind. And I think history past, we need to start looking at examining how did those people then go and deal with their families, go and do a night shift. And I know they're all talking about church hurt, but it is an environment that was built up from the constituency of ordinary people coming from the Caribbean, filled with consistent and continual trauma from their experience. And I keep on saying, you have to then begin to examine, look back more carefully and with compassion at your elders. You can't throw your elders under the bus, because you will have no wisdom and Sankofa. Africanness means that we look at the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Affinity Xtra, be extra.
Yeah, guys, this is Roger Moore here on Affinity X. Way to be, I always say fast and extra, but only fast. I've only applied for the Caribbean community because then we know what fast means. But this is on the edge, and I just have having conversations with mental health because talk to my expert Angela concerning black mental health, and how community responds to it, and how we still slow on the come up on mental health. Now I may talk about mental health maybe from an Afro-Caribbean 90s approach, an 80s approach to mental health, but I thought, you know what, it's unfair for me to be talking from bad experiences of mental health within churches, and maybe speak to somebody who is currently operating as a minister, as a bishop, as a pastor of a pastoring people right now, as over a church predominantly Afro-Caribbean, and how bishop responds to mental health issues in the church and his opinion about it, because we have a lot of thought processes towards how the church handles it, but a lot of it is based from poor approach in the 70s, 80s and 90s to mental health. So we had mental health. It's so conveniently how Mental Health Day is in the middle of Black History Month. Is that quite convenient? I just thought that was. I
think they just like to throw everything all in one to just confuse up the whole month. They just hate having a month to try and be obviously, sensitive towards black issues. However, we take it on the chin and just deal with it. I think it's important for it to be amongst us because it's a prevalent challenge of our day. And I think that, it's a prevalent challenge of our day, but at the same time, it's the perspective of it is that there has not only been a ignorant response towards mental health from our communities, but our communities populate our churches. Therefore, one then pervades into another. And I suppose the professionalism did not reach our communities till much later. If you look at it till much later, and you've got to start talking about the church as a community, not just as an entity of its own, because everybody within that church is part of the community. And so they bring a community perspective to that church. So some communities are wise and some are not wise. And so your church circle is then, it mirrors, if you like, the advances of its community. And so in history past, community and church were a little bit behind the curve when it came to understanding mental health in the black community. And especially, you got to think about it this way. We don't have millions of pounds of government money to research. And you imagine that the government are just realizing how bad they have done when it comes to mental health in the black community. And that's government with money, never mind tithes and offering and partner. You understand what I'm saying? So there's never been, this huge economic thrust towards resolving the issues. We have just had to cope with the issues. Once you've got people who are in your congregation, they've got no CPN, they've got no guidance, they've got no counseling, they've got no meds going to go into their bodies to kind of balance things out. They're just living amongst their church folk, and everybody expects then that church is going to respond in its highest professional capacity when it doesn't really have that, if you like, that capacity within the congregation. Obviously, we move forward now, and we do have a lot of mental health guidance and capacity within the congregations. But I think that we tend to get the biggest, heaviest cat of nine tails whip and attack the black church first. Every time. If there's a small abuse case, if there's an abuse case, then it's the black church that's killed everybody off. That evil, devil, nasty black church. Ain't nobody talking about the Anglican church. Ain't nobody talking about the white church down the road. They're not always the black church, because I think that once it is an institution that has been phenomenally successful in some ways of being independent and strong, but it cannot continue that way, because if it continues independent and strong, it will have its opinions. It will have its own ideas of how to build a community. So
that's something which I remember I was watching Summer of Soul. It's an American program, but they in the late 60s they identified the way people were released if they're feeling bad. They knew effectively their mental release was going to church and enjoying the worship and to hear somebody tell two truths. That was their release of their
cathartic. It's therapeutic.
Very therapeutic to go there and be blessed and come out feeling better, and it was part of a spiritual kind of uplifting, which this is where the fun part comes into. What we call spirituality and what we call mental health, and it's a very fine line, because saying bipolar in church when I was a kid was like saying, oh, well, that person's possessed, that's why they're speaking in demons are in them, and all that. How do you navigate that, especially as a Pentecostal minister who people assume that straight away you're laying hands and trying to chuck out 50,000 demons and legions out of somebody if they're coming with kind of like a Tourette's or a bipolar? How I'm not saying you face this, but how do you contemplate these modern diagnoses of mental health? And what we would see 20-30 years ago is called mothers, fathers. We got back at you go back, you get the oil out and you go in for 2 hours.
But then this is the phenomenological question that you can ask, if you can keep my false teeth in. Phenomenology of this is that in history past, a lot of people went through mental health issues and, yes, went through the system of being laid hands upon and commanded healing over them, because that's what they were trying to do at the time, because they had no other choice. Nobody was stepping up and saying, oh, we've got this mental health facility, we'll calm them down, we'll pray, we'll give them over. Some people were medded up even just because they were tired for working nights and days. So this was the ethos of it. So back in the day, you look at this phenomenology of how is it then that some people were laid hands upon and were spiritually ministered to and delivered, as we call it in our language of Pentecostalism, and now are healthier and better and do not suffer from any mental health issues now. This is the phenomenology of it. Why is it that worked for them then, but some others it didn't work for? So what I would say is each case is individual. Sometimes it is then a long journey of counsel. Sometimes it is trauma, and sometimes trauma is linked to the life of church. So we've got to face the fact that some people were abused in church. Some people went through their trauma in church. The traumatizing person was a leader in the church. So they have this connection with church, but it's not a
triggering
good one. It's an unhealthy one. So this is the challenge that we have. Everything has progression. And so the black church now has had to go through a series of progressive steps. What are those progressive steps? We had now clinicians that were part of the church.
Yes.
Because it was deemed as, if you get any education, you leave the church. Now we do not have that ethos that when you are educated, you come back and you give to the church. Now we've got mental health specialists, of course, who sit on the pews. Mental health nurses who say, hey, Bishop, that's a psychosis. This is what we need to do. We will pray, but that person, we need to check what meds are they on. How are the meds working for them?
Oh, wow.
You know, I mean, going through it, all of my ministry in Birmingham, I have dealt with mental health issues flowing through the benches of the church, and that is a fact. Some people, when they're medded up, are balanced.
Yeah.
Some people are not necessarily balanced all the time. So you now have to navigate your pastoral care through that.
Because the thing is, when you talk about medicine, for me, did you ever feel like, especially with your first instances of mental health, do you feel like you failed as a spiritual leader over someone if they need meds to calm their nerves down? It really sounds like you. I'm not saying yourself.
Yeah, no, I never have. Because one thing is clear: when I first got here, I had a mentor in mental health issues, and her name was Sandra Thomas. God bless her. She's still alive now, but remember, it's Sandra Thomas who went through a massive brain bleed and so on. And I really just give her the highest respect. And right now, as she lives, may the memory of what she has done in the mental health sector be never forgotten. She mentored me to understand what mental health is, to not take on board the negativities of you failed as a leader. It is just it is a chemical imbalance in the people, and sometimes it's an emotional imbalance in the person. And therefore you have to go through a process of healing. Some are not willing to go through the process of healing, but some are, you know. So that's what you kind of have to live with in some senses. Some people have to live with the challenge of mental health. Some people have it as their mental health is good mental health.
Yes.
We could say myself and you have good mental health.
Yeah.
And some people have bad mental health.
Yeah.
So if we look at it as just like the physical body, your body may be physically unwell and it may be physically well. Yeah. So we look at it as a unwellness in terms of a medical issue at times, and also spiritual issue at times as well. You really have to just pray for discernment in it and make sure that you are not cutting a person off.
Wow.
Unless it becomes a little bit,
I hear,
challenging for you, because some mental health issues for some people, they become really volatile. And I say that you've got to have the wisdom to know what you can manage, because if it's volatile and you can get a huge challenge to yourself and your own safety, then you've got to now understand the risks that you take.
It's amazing. You made your point about we've got a lot of professionals in the mental health scene, which hasn't been recognised in the church. I mean, I mean, some of them have been around for 30 years in the arena, and it's good to hear that we are now starting to bring them into the forefront. It's a shame that they've taken so long, but we bring to the forefront, and myself, it's good that it's having that balance of feeling. It's physical health and mental health is really effectively the same sort of thing. If you take a paracetamol for a bit of pain, no one sees it as a failure, but if you take a certain medication for mental health, it's seen as a spiritual failure. You know what I mean? I feel that I don't know. I'm not saying I'm right for saying that, but you know me. You feel like,
I think history past as presented it like this, and also very, 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 very recent in that history. Also, if you're sick and you don't pray for healing, then people think that you have not enough faith. So a lot of groups used to believe that until they had a little bit more knowledge and wisdom to recognize that yes, there are sicknesses that stay with you. Thorn in the flesh, like the Apostle Paul, and he talks about Timothy. He says, drink a little wine because he had maybe an issue to do with his bowels. Drink a little wine for the stomach's sake. So, and then you get this issue of, okay, then how do you pastor people in it? People talk about like when Paul went on the Damascus Road and he was knocked down by Christ, that could be classed as a mental health crisis.
Yeah.
Right? And he was pastored through his crisis. He had to go to Arabia. So if you read into the text, you will see that there is a lot of mental health crises going on. Jesus meets the man or the men, he said. So it might be multiple. He meets the man in the graveyard. He has been cast out of his community. So Jesus comes into the graveyard to focus and to confront the enemy's isolation of this man. What is part of his therapeutia? One, Jesus rebukes the demon's action upon the man. So we've got to start looking at the biblical text demands that we examine what the enemy's or the satanic actions are towards the person's mental health. But look at this. Jesus does not castigate the person. He then speaks healing into the man, becomes a presence in the man's life, and then sends him back to the therapeutic environment that he needs. Go with your family. Can you see?
Okay, yeah,
so you've got to look
yeah,
at the inside of, it's not just a cookie cutter cut situation. In that situation, Jesus allows him to recognize him as Lord and Savior of his life, heals the situation, and then allows him to go back into a therapeutic environment so it didn't recur in the man. Doesn't tell you, there's no conversation about how he got there. But what we do know is that he was isolated and castigated by his community. He had to live in the graves.
Great. Yeah, no.
You know?
No.
So that there is this challenge in the church to say we have to be the ones who do not castigate and do not push away. And I think that's what we've been guilty of in history past. Because we didn't understand. And I think it's the same, but then we want to put all of the whips upon the church, but you ask yourself the question, did they come from space or do they have a family?
What's
did they come from space? Are they individuals that were just born, they were just dropped on the earth, they had no mother and father, they had no brothers and sisters, and they were just dropped on the earth? How did they become the full responsibility of the church?
But do you find within our community though, Bishop, you've got, and I have to, Afro-slave community. We've almost got the short straw here because we've got generational trauma. You know what I'm saying? And no identity.
Right.
So where the other people got a little bit more advantage, other cultures, because I know who they are culturally. We know who they are. You know what I'm saying? So do you feel like we've got the short straw here when it comes to this thing where I hear what you're saying about the families and community, the family elements, but it's almost there's such a bad hand-me-down of parental care. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying there's no good parents and bad parents, but I feel like, and I only come from an Afro-Caribbean and what I see here, we come from a heavily trying to do better than our last generation because the hand-me-down hasn't been so as good as what other communities seem to be getting. So you've almost got a short straw of having been part of an Afro-slave community that has no government support of a government created situation of generations back. Is that a fair statement or is that a bit too
I think a lot of people would say to you, that's history past, don't worry about that now. Or not say don't worry about it, but you should not be focusing on that now because that's history past.
History past.
But I would say to you that trauma seems to be a wicked hand-me-down experience from generations, and sometimes that generation had no therapeutia, no help to heal. If you look at the trauma that the Jews went through, every moment there is a time of therapeutia, time of reconciliation, time of healing. We've never had a public time of proper acknowledgement of the traumas of transatlantic slavery and colonialism, because we can only speak from a Caribbean perspective. We exist because of wicked actions. So the Nigerian or the Ghanaian can go back to their ancestral lands and become healed. And become healed by going back to their ancestral lands. We go down to Jamaica and and we just don't even know, we don't know what the hell's going on half the time. We go there and say Irie and don't realize that there is an ancestral conversation that we have to have to become whole again. And I'm not talking about worshiping ancestors, because I'm a born again believer. I don't believe in worshiping ancestors. I believe in acknowledging the work that they have done and then acknowledging the strength of where they come from. But I think that the traumas are continually purveying amongst our communities. For instance, like if you get an abuse trauma, like a sexual abuse trauma in our community, it's probably done by somebody of significance in the person's life.
Yeah.
So this is just a statistical evidences of it. And when it's done by somebody of significance, perhaps that somebody of significance is still around and existing in that person's life, that young woman or that young man's life. So therefore, they are not able to deal with the trauma, and the justice of the trauma is not there. There's no justice. So when there's no justice, they have to live with the trauma. And then sometimes that can then be awakened by an emotional crisis, the death of a mother, the death of a father. It awakens the emotional crisis. So you've got this continued trauma going through that family of one abused one abuse another, an abuser created another abuser. And there's nothing that stops that.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So when they get to a certain point, if they become a born-again believer, they come and then they sit inside a sanctuary or in a church. Sometimes the spiritual atmosphere can trigger emotions and trigger how they feel. And therefore, it becomes a challenge to them to keep themselves together, because they're going through the triggers. So what we have to look at also is to look behind the physical signs. Look behind the physical signs and say, is there something else that we need to talk about? Tell me about your life. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about how you feel about, sexuality. Tell me how you feel about your mother, your father. We're going to have to go deeper than looking at the surface. And I think today the black church is at a pivotal point, or a pivotal situation, where it now needs to embrace the academia that it has amongst it. Get academia now to stop talk, engage in the life of the church, be regular in your conversation, but also document the challenges as well. So you've got documentation. What you have in the European church or the white church, you get a lot of documentation of things. Therefore, you can read document, you can read statistics, you can read the situation or the drama that comes forth, and therefore you're able to find a resource to be able to heal the situation. So therefore we've got to now resource the situation so we can bring healing to the situation. And we might have to have different kinds of third tier, or should I say second tier styles of churches that deal specifically with mental health trauma. And it could not be church, it might just be a group within a church that deals with mental health trauma. So you're not having it on display for the wider church to critique and say, what a go on here? You know what I mean?
You can't do it all on a Sunday.
Right.
So for me, actually treatments for mental health, you could say, okay, right, go to the studio with Roger and just play some gospel music in the back.
Okay,
you know what I'm saying? And it could be their little therapy, whatever that's going on, or just a healthy environment where they just real talk about the scenarios. But in terms of handling mental, like everything you're saying is real on point, Bishop. I find that there's some preventative things that I feel that the American culture, I mentioned it to my colleague Angela, and I said to her, my mental health, I said, I see there's a massive culture towards counselling in America.
Definitely. Psychologists.
They have a family counsellor, and I feel that I don't know if it's an Afro-Caribbean thing. I have to say Afro-Caribbean guys, so I only could talk for my community, but it's kind of like, is it that we're just a couple years behind them, and now I feel like, but how do we assign? Like for me, it's now assigning it, trying to get my missus to open up, you know what I mean, our people to open up and have a counsellor, to have safe environments. It's hard enough because we said, boy, back in the day I said something in church and the whole church knew my business, and it's really a case of changing the culture and realizing, getting it off your chest, getting it out there, putting it out, in a safe environment is good instead of buttoning up and traumatizing yourself.
Yeah, I think that two things have happened in the past. I think, well, not two things, but several things have happened in the past. One is that there has been counselors, but perhaps not been given the protocol of a Hippocratic oath, which means when a person tells you something, unless it is a high case of abuse, then you are
Or suicide or something.
governed suicide. You are governed to keep that person's confidence. Pastors were given that role, but at the same time, pastors had nobody to share with, so the burden became too much. And a lot of your pastors going through their own trauma. They went through mental health. I know of a senior minister right now who went into his 70s, and I don't know whether mental health kicked off, but it did. It kicked off in his 70s, and he took a rifle, went out, ready to go on war with the police, and they shot him and killed him recently over in the United States. So it reminds me that sometimes the minister is taking so much burden from listening to the brethren, he has no one to share it to. So when he spills it to a certain deacon or someone, he's just stressed out of his own mind. And I think history past, we need to start looking at examining how did those people then go and deal with their families, go and do a night shift. And I know they're all talking about church hurt, but it is an environment that was built up from the constituency of ordinary people coming from the Caribbean, filled with consistent and continual trauma from their experience. And I keep on saying, you have to then begin to examine, look back more carefully and with compassion at your elders. Can't throw your elders under the bus, because you will have no wisdom and sankofa. Africanness means that we look at the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we collect the good.
Come on. Yeah.
And the bad is a lesson for the future. But what we can't do is throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes,
and I think some of us have no roots. We're finding roots in other places that have no sense. If you continue with church hurt without reflection on church growth,
and
church lessons learned,
yeah.
you will have no roots. And I think that some people in our environment don't realize that the key to healing is to go back and do Sankofa in, okay, what were the good things? The good things are we met, we ate together, we sat down, we talked together, we worshiped together. Okay, we became a support group for each other. Okay, what were the bad things? No confidentiality. I must make sure that I am confidential. Same people who are talking about confidentiality in one environment will step into another environment and have no confidentiality at all.
Now, and I think also what I realized as well a few years back, shrinks, as we would call them, psychiatrists.
Yeah, because they're a standard thing in America now.
So they will obviously talk, but then they will turn around and then in the end of the day they talk to each other.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And it's a simple things. There's some simple things in terms of district. Say your district now, Bishop. You could say, all right, guys, we have we meet up as ministers every month, and we have a locked door meeting where we just get certain things off our chest and we say for the brotherhood. And I believe that we've done that many times, but probably done it on an unofficial basis. Have mentors that we can offload on. I've had to have certain things to offload on, you know what I mean? People safe environments, and it creates Christian safe environments around me. But we've done a lot of this thing and undocumented it probably, and no one's learned from that. And now it's for us to go, okay, there might be that person who opened their mouth, but why didn't so-and-so didn't it? Because he had 4 or 5 pastors that he met up with every month that just got off their chest and prayed together. Right.
I think it's a partnership. It's a lot of things are to do with partnerships. How do we partner together to become healthier people? And I think that's the big thing. How do we partner together to become healthier people? There's nothing wrong with sitting down and having a group of people that you sit down and share your feelings with. And I think that is the thing that hampered us from before. Pastors always felt, if I share my feelings with the brethren, I will never pastor these brethren again. And brethren felt like, if pastor tells me, right, that he's had an argument with his wife, I will never listen to any of his sermons again. That idiot. If pastor's child backslides, he's a pile of rubbish. And the same person who says you that is, 1, in a bad marriage, 2, their children have all backslidden. But they expect You know, they expect the pastor's life to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, he has a standard that he lives by, but he's got to be perfect. So I think, again,
That's good. Yeah.
becoming human to each other is so important.
No.
If you become human as a pastor, you know, you will lose some people, but you will gain more. And I think as a member, you know, we're talking about churchmanship now. You know, as Christian believers, we are told to share each other's burdens. So that means that we are not each other's judges, but we are each other's brothers' keepers. So we share each other's burdens and we carry the load of each other. Therefore, the load becomes lighter. And I think it is the same with people who are going through mental health issues. They are still the wonderful, beautiful people that God has made.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is carry the burden with them. And yes, we have limits that we can carry them, but we need to let them understand that we are carrying the burden with them.
Come on.
Yeah. And I think that
yeah.
then becomes a therapeutic for them. There are some that you cannot help. Let's face the facts. Yeah, there are some issues that you are not going to be able to immediately help. But others you can. Yeah. And some are more long-term than short-term.
Yeah.
Some are just short-term situations of mental health, which will rectify themselves as the person becomes more balanced. Some are long-term, where they have to kind of get a balance within their own psyche, within their own chemical makeup within their body, their own physiological makeup, as we call it. And so you've got that you have to also anticipate as a life in your church.
Yeah. And I have to say that, you know, Christian things that you would preach on Sunday about forgiveness. Yeah. Simple things of just listening to Bishop like talk about, really, you know, people holding on to things is bad for your mental health. Just as, you know, and you preach good mental health. You know what I mean? You know, forgiveness is probably one of the most hardest things to do as human beings. You know what I'm saying? Let alone that's why you have to preach on it every week. You know what I'm saying? And then we wonder 20, 30 years later, you're talking to people, well, my mom left me in Jamaica, but she went to the other kids, and them things come up. I'm finding things coming up when people are burying their parents now, and they're thinking, wow. And I'm thinking, you held that on.
It's even worse now. Because it's not even to do with Jamaica. It's about here. You know what I mean? It's about here, where you have access, you have money, you have finance. You know, my dad, you know, had me with my mom's. My mom lives on Gerrard Street. Where your dad live? Oh, on Wheeler Street. And you never saw him. Yeah, I saw him walking past, but I never saw him.
Wow.
So there's that trauma immediately.
And they hold it there.
And they're holding it.
Yeah. And they're doing it wrong.
And there's also you know, there's also the challenge of people who used to be in sort of little gang affiliated as well. No stories of like young women who were basically trained. I think they call it trained. I hate to know every colonialism. You know what I mean? Every word that deals with this, because I'm not an expert, but what I do know is that she thought she was with this guy, and when they went to probably, you know, have an intimate time or have sex together, then boom, he called his brethren in, and the whole of them had sex with the same girl. Now, the reason why she kind of dropped into mental health, in my view, is because she never told anybody.
And it's there.
She never told anybody.
Wow.
And she kept seeing that same person who did it to her, but she didn't tell anybody. And when you're hearing it afterwards and you realize that it's traumatized them so long, then you've got to recover something. But the big thing that you've got to recover for them at times is a sense of, I have no justice. So this is the certain things that we've got to start looking at in our community. What are the things that we just accept as a norm that we cannot, in going on in the future, and if we're going to be healthy, certain things cannot be accepted as a norm. Pedophilia cannot be a norm. And let me just point this out, and it can be a soft edge and it can be a hard edge. You know, when you've got real big, older, mature men looking for very young women to be in their lives, right? I know it's a controversial thing to say, but we've got to look at what creates the trauma and the mental health. you've got to have a balance where you look at, say, okay, I see the signs that we need to start looking at and saying, okay, this is not acceptable for us. You know, that's just one of the areas. Relationships, you know, very violent relationships that we think is a standard thing to happen in our communities. So you've got that as well as things that we don't speak about because we're so fearful of people suggesting that that's all them good for. And what you don't want to recognize, or you don't recognize, is that, hey, every community is going through this.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Wow. And if you don't speak about it, if you don't talk about it and have a therapeutic environment where you can share the burden of your soul, then mental health can kick in your life. I'm not saying always, but it can kick in your life. There are other things as well. Excessive use of drugs that we accept as a norm. Yeah.
Green teeth.
Even us, you know, even us as ministers, we go to a funeral and we're tired now. We're tired of telling people stop smoking weed around the grave. And what we're seeing is people look zombified around the grave. Some people, where black is not supposed to crack before about 80 years old. Brethren, we got to look at this thing carefully. What are the things that are contributing to our poor mental health? Yeah. And that's what, with certain things, we've got to start calling them out. You follow me? Yeah. We've got to start calling them out, and we need, as a church, this is the stick that we need to beat the church with. One is we need to be more focused on people than community power structures. Because I think that we're focused on having community power structures. We want to be the powerful one in the chambers with the council, so that when we walk in, the council wet up themselves when we see us. We want to be the powerful one in the meeting. We want to be the leader who speaks. We want the cameras to be in our face. We want ITV to come and make a comment with us. We need to start asking ourselves, what is our mission to the people? We need to now focus on being a therapeutic environment of healing, where, yes, there's going to be a challenge with the issues, but they're going to see that there is light at the end of my street, my church.
Come on.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And we have to do that in a way of, did we contribute to their mental health on well-being or damage? Yeah. If we did, we repent. And we speak directly to what we contributed to.
And I think repenting from is I want to close soon because I know Bishop we're busy day.
We've got a busy day.
You know what I'm saying? But something you mentioned there was a generation that saw the change of a lot of our doctrines. And I know going to certain churches that banned wedding rings.
Hallelujah.
And you know what I'm saying?
Cheaper.
You know what I'm saying? And
but all silliness like that.
And then you got the husbands beating because they're not going to church. See the wife put down, take off the ring.
Right.
You know what I mean? You go, hold on, you take off the ring for?
And I buy it from Jewelry Quarter. You mad?
And when some women face a physical
abuse
and emotional abuse, and then when the church says, "Oh, it's cool," and no apology, bro, you know that brings up. I
think there's other things as well. I think that there's too much focus. There was not enough focus on building the marriage life of the women and the men. I think that there was just the one focus on building the church. And you don't realize, to build the church, you've got to build families.
Yeah.
That's what the church is. Constituencies is the families. If you bring them in, they've got to be healthier people. And you've got to be able to know confidently when you speak to the husband that he feels a sense of well-being to say, my wife is being taught well at church. Therefore, she's becoming a better wife.
And then it challenges him to say,
and it challenges him to become a better man.
And then he goes, I might have to pop. He said, you going to church today? Oh, may I come? May I come?
Yeah, because many of them speak to me and say, Pastor, this, and it's so funny that they come and they say, Pastor, me tell her, remember when you preached last week? And then she looks at me and says, oh my days, my husband remembered the sermon. You see what I mean? Remember what you preached last week, Pastor?
Yeah, man.
So and then you get the husband then joining in. So one of the key things is churches need to focus more on building the people more than, pretty in the building. Although the building needs to be a place where it can enhance therapeutic languages, creating counseling areas, creating places where they can sit, have a tea and a coffee, having a decent toilet, Lord Jesus of mercy, having seats that they can sit down on, having a place where their children can come and play. All of that, saying to yourself, your mission is not to be a studio, your mission is to be the village where the people come
on,
and are healed.
Yeah, man.
And that's going to take some fierce agenda forward. You're going to have mental health professionals on your pastoral team, not only in the benches, but on your leadership team and your pastoral team. You're going to have some chaplains that deal with specifically with mental health and physical health. That's your chaplains need to flow into that. And chaplain means those who represent people in those areas. And we've got those. We're moving and we're developing those across our churches, which is important. Good. You know, we've got to have people who go, do prison ministry, because prison can be a place that damages mental health. So we make that connection there as well. Yeah. So these are all the connections that we're trying to develop, and we continue to do so. And I keep saying to churches, we are not a finished product until Jesus puts his foot on the Mount of Olives.
Wow.
Get it?
Yeah.
We're not a finished product. We have to continue to develop. We have to repent for the sins of the past, and also now speak to the people that we broke their hearts. Speak to the people directly.
Wow.
Whether the people are alive or dead, take responsibility for it.
Wow.
And say to the people that we broke their hearts, to say we have to repent for that. But also the people who denigrated the church have to repent too. They have to repent too, because they didn't realize that the church is more important than you realize. A man said to me out on the road, he said, this is the most valuable thing where we community have. He's not a Christian. Yeah, Marasta. Him said the church is the most valuable asset of the community.
Come on, yeah.
That's what he said to me.
Yeah, man.
Pastor, me, I tell you. You understand? And what I'm saying to us now, we have to now start recognizing that people out in the community now need to stop digging down who we are and start saying to ourselves, how am I going to build this up? I don't like how the Rock is isolated from this situation. I'm going to go speak to Pastor Nathan, Pastor Jackson. I'm going to send him an email and say, Pastor, why are we isolated from this situation? Can we do something about it? Not just going and sitting down at the wake and cussing down everybody. Cuss. What is your cussing doing to change the community? When you're smoking weed with your brethren, them and just a drink up, what is it doing to develop the community? The better thing is to do is same time and say, Pastor, come on, all a reason with me now. We need to share this with you. And you see now, things change when that happens. I have had so many people that have changed their perspective. They said to me, Pastor, we only have each other. Let me all a reason with you. Now, I'm not a smoker. I'm not a drinker. You know what I mean? But I hold a reason with them, and we start looking about how can we work together. And that's what I'm saying to them. Look, work with your churches to develop that. If you've got a mental health professional qualification and skill, please get in contact with your local church if you're not there already, and say, I want to render this gift that God has given me as a part of the growth of the church and development.
Bless.
And we can do it if we look at it as a perspective of, we are not just thinking about the historical element, we are thinking about where we're going to be in the future.
Yeah, setting things up correctly. No, that's fantastic, guys. We got to close because we can. It's such a big subject. We can be read eyesight and start to go focus. And we're going to bring Angela into these conversations as well as a young trainee doctor in mental health, in black mental health. She's doing a doctorate at the moment in mental health and black community within the Midlands, and she's struggling to get people to participate, but that's a whole nother subject in itself.
Okay.
But you know what I'm saying, but we'll get on there. But guys, do any questions, any comments, do make comments and questions. We will do our best to address them. And if we're not able to, people will get somebody who will, because we're not trying to hide away from the subject. We've got nothing to hide, man. We just want our community to move forward, want our community to be elevated, and we want our community to be where it should be. It's not where it should be, but we want to be part of this journey. And you know what, we have to move forward, we have to move on. I could spend all day talking about our hurts in the past. Everybody knows I can do that, but the reality shows I have to have balance and actually know that I need to be still producing for things for our community community to go forwards as well, and understanding them things and moving forward. Well, Bishop, thanks for your time. Do check out Bishop's program, Rock Solid. You know what I'm saying? Dealing with definitely black dignity when it comes to Christianity, and really pulling out the things that bishops don't really talk about when it comes to blackness. I really appreciate that, bro. It's been a year now, and we continue. And you know what? We're only scratching the surface so far. We just warm up the water, and we're going to continue with this drive. And it's almost a case of this wasn't for this season. God intended it for this season, and we know that that's why we're doing it on time every time. Yeah. This is how
Thank
we do, man. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Blessed.
Then bless.
Respect.
God bless everyone. This is Roger over and out. Make sure you like, subscribe, do everything you need to do on this YouTube channel. God bless you.
Awesome.
Visit us for updates and shows at affinityextra.co.uk.